tough, through, though, thought, cough, bough. 6 words, the same 4 letters at the end, O, U, G, H, 6 completely different sounds. English spelling gets called chaos, random, broken. It is none of those things. It is a photograph taken at the worst possible moment in history. Welcome back to How Languages Work. Today, why English spelling stopped making sense, the exact century it broke, and the 4% of words that really are hopeless. And the good news at the end, because English spelling is far more predictable than anyone ever told you. Let's start with what those silent letters are actually doing. Part 1. The letters are not lying. Take night. Take night. K-N-I-G-H-T. Today, 2 of those letters do nothing at all. But in Chaucer's English, you pronounce every one of them. K, nicht. The K was a K, and the GH was a rasp, like the ch in German ich. And it is the same story everywhere else. Walk had its L, wrong had its W, gnaw had its G, knee had its K, or in Scots nicht. So the spelling was accurate, ruthlessly accurate. It described how English genuinely sounded when it was written down. The problem is not that it was ever wrong. The problem is that it was never updated again the century it broke. 1476. William Caxton hauls a printing press across the channel and sets it up at Westminster. And immediately, England had no standard spelling. Every scribe spelled by ear in their own dialect. Caxton had to pick something, so he leaned on the London and Westminster, writing the government offices already used. Often called Chancery Standard, though scholars now argue about that label. A reasonable choice. Except printing does something handwriting never could. It makes a spelling permanent. Thousands of identical copies, all at once, all agreeing with each other. Before the press, spelling drifted along with speech. After it, spelling stopped moving, and that would have been completely fine if English had also stopped moving. Part 3. Between roughly 1400 and 1700, every long vowel in English picked itself up and moved. Not a handful of words, the whole system, across 3 centuries, all at once. Here is what that actually sounded like. Name was namu, bite was beat, meat was mate, house was whose, moon was mon. Read that list out loud, and you are speaking to somebody from 1400. The vowels all rose in the mouth, and the 2 already at the very top had nowhere left to go, so they broke apart into diphthongs. Beat became bite. Nobody is certain why it happened. Mass migration into London after the Black Death, throwing dialects together, is one of the leading suspects, but honestly no one knows. What we do know is when it happened, and what it did to the spelling. So put the 2 dates side by side. Printing froze the spelling in 1476. The vowels kept moving until about 1700. That is 200 years of drift, and that is why the ough words refuse to rhyme. Here is the part almost everyone gets wrong. They were never one single sound. Ough was a spelling that swallowed several different Middle English sounds at once. And then that rasp at the end went silent in some words and turned into an F in others. In the 1500s, from the 1400s, and peaking in the 1500s, English scholars developed an inferiority complex. Latin was the language of learning. Next to it, English looked like a peasant. So they decided to fix it, and sometimes the spelling. They started inserting letters into perfectly good English words, purely to show off the Latin hiding underneath. They simply got it wrong. Elan was a perfectly good English word. England, from Old English with no S anywhere. They added one because they assumed it belonged with isle, which really does come from Latin insula. Island does not. That S is a mistake, and it is still sitting there today. Scissors is the same story. They linked it to Latin scindere, to split. It actually reached English through French from cisorium, a cutting tool. Wrong guess. Permanent letter. And then my favorite of the whole story. Caxton brought Flemish typesetters over with him. When an English word looked like a Flemish word, they spelled it the Flemish way. Ghost became ghost. They tried the same trick on other words too. Goose, good, girly. Those all died. Ghost and ghastly survived, though not quickly. The GH spelling did not really win until the 1550s, almost a century later. So the next time English spelling annoys you, remember, some of it started as a habit in a Flemish typesetter's hands 500 years ago, and nobody ever got around to correcting it. It is not chaos. Here is where almost everybody gets English wrong. It gets called random. It is not random, and we do not have to argue about it because somebody measured it. In 1966, Hannah and colleagues ran 17,310 words through a computer, checking every sound in every word against how it was spelled. Nearly 50% of words came out completely predictable from the rules. Another 34% missed by exactly one sound. And once you allow for word origin and meaning, only 4% are truly irregular. 4%. That is the famous chaos. Everything else follows rules. You were simply never taught what the rules were. Now compare that with Spanish, where the letters tell you the sound almost perfectly, and the real difference becomes obvious. Spanish writes the present. English writes its own history. And that is the reframe that finally makes English spelling learnable. It is not telling you how a word sounds. It is telling you where the word came from, which is also why knowing a little French or a little Latin quietly makes you a better speller in English. You stop memorizing and start recognizing. So here is your homework. Pick 5 words you always misspell and look up where each one came from. I promise at least one will suddenly make sense. Tell me in the comments which one it was. And if English makes a little more sense now, subscribe. Because next time, why children learn languages faster than you, and why that is only half true. Sources are below as always. See you in the next one. Nos vemos.